Well, hey, howdy, hi! Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by to join me today. I really do appreciate it. My name is Ellie, and I'm a witch, and this over here is my teaching assistant, Andy, and today I'm going to bring you some stalker stories from Reddit. So for October, I wanted to do some videos that kind of fall into the creepy or unsettling realm, and so I will be leaning on Reddit for some of those stories. I wanted to start with stalker stories, and I will say that some of these will be a little bit darker than others, and others are just kind of maybe uncomfortable for those involved. And because I am doing stalker stories and using other people's stories at that, I figured I would share my own, thankfully not dark, stalker story as well. I was a shift leader at a Taco Bell. I was always on the floor with my crew, so I was at the front register or drive-through register quite often. I was 24, married, with 2 small children, and I only lived a few streets away from the store. I would often walk to work to save gas. A guy a little older than me started coming in a lot. He was always very friendly, almost too friendly. He would only come in on my shifts, I started to find out, and then it turned out that he was there for every single one of my shifts. I told my husband, so I don't think he ever came to our house, but he was a shadow at work. Then, one day, I came in and found him being trained by one of the assistant managers. He tried to get put on my shifts, but I freaked out and immediately went to the office to talk to the store manager. She had no idea about how he'd been in the store all this time. She knew that there was a guy, but she didn't know it was him. She was horrified. She promised that she'd keep him away from me until she could get him transferred to another store. She called the store closest while I was standing there and got the transfer. He'd be at our store for that day only. His next day would be at the other store, and it would be his home store. She let me take the day off. She called in the other night shift manager. When I came to work the next day, she said that he'd not taken the news well that he'd have to work at the other store and quit. He came a few more times after that, so I got my husband to sit in the dining room and scare him off. I did not see him again after that. When I was about 19, I met this guy who worked at the Subway near where I worked. He was a nice enough guy and he took me out on a date. Everything started off really well, but about a week into it, he started asking me for money. It started off small at first, like for a soda or $5 for gas. Then he started asking for larger amounts, like a few hundred to get him by for a week or so. I never gave it to him, but he started wanting to move in together within about 2 weeks of dating. When we would go out places, he started to do very weird things. He would start screaming in public or singing nonsense at the top of his lungs. He would always play around afterwards that he was just having fun, but it was weird and embarrassing to be seen with him. Also, my dog, who loves everyone, would not let him near me. I've never seen that dog so much as growl at another person, but he would try and bite the shit out of him when he came close to me. By the end of the second week, I broke up with him over the phone. I normally didn't do that, but at the time, his erratic behavior made me nervous. He completely flipped the fuck out. He started showing up where I worked to the point where my manager had to ban him from the building and coworkers walked me to my car. He would show up literally everywhere I was, even to the grocery store or the gas station. I started getting text messages and weird emails about how we were meant to be and he couldn't live without me and such. And one day, he showed up in the middle of the night and told me to come outside. I told him to leave or I was going to call the cops. He literally started sobbing to the point where he was almost hyperventilating. I went back inside and locked the house up. The next day I was home alone and I was just doing some work. At the time I was in college, when I heard some rustling by the front door. I thought it was just the dog messing around or the mailman or something, but the dog started barking and growling. The doorbell began to ring. Didn't think much of it, probably just a solicitor. Then someone started messing with the door handle. I grabbed a broom of all things, because that's all I had, and I heard someone open the door. My dog tried to bite him, and I locked myself in the bathroom and started screaming that I called the police. He up and ran away. I called my neighbor who lived across the street from me and was former military. He checked out the house and made sure he was gone. My dog had a few scrapes and cuts on him, but he was okay. I filed for a restraining order the next day, and my dad took the liberty of calling his father and explaining what happened. I received a few other emails from him following that, but he never came to my house again. Luckily, I've moved a few hours away and I'm married now, but it was still very frightening at the time considering it was only about a 3-week period. I stalked a girl for about 3 years before I finally realized just what I was doing. I met her in high school and fell head over heels. You see, I was bullied a lot through school. I was sort of an outcast, and I isolated myself because I didn't trust people. At the point I met her, most of the females around me seemed either dismissive and annoyed I was near them, or only nice because they didn't want to be mean. But she was different. When I met her, she treated me like I was human, like I was worth something. To sum it up with a metaphor, every time I was thirsty, people would hand me a glass of vinegar. She was the first to hand me a glass of ordinary water. It seemed like something special, even though it wasn't. A few months later, her family moved out of town. But at this point, I was convinced that she was the one, my only key out of that hell, my ticket to finally be able to have a happy life. I found every bit of information about her online, every one of her accounts across various social media sites. I posted to her Facebook page on a weekly basis. If she did something online, I knew about it. Eventually, I contacted her younger siblings online and started chatting with them. It finally culminated in me going to her house, which I found by going through her pictures. I knocked on the door thinking she would be gleeful to see me, and there was no answer. Then it all hit me. This wasn't an endeavor of love. She didn't feel anything special towards me. I was being erratic and obsessive. I so deeply regret my actions. I feel that the only thing I can do that would come close to an apology is to distance myself as completely as possible. Make it so that all she knows of me is in distant memories. And then finally, my personal story. This is a little bit longer, so bear with me. I started working at a gas station a few months after I turned 19. Now, I worked the night shift. It was about until 9 or 10 at night. I was on good terms with a lot of my regulars, and we would chat or bullshit while I checked them out. There was one customer who was clearly a little off, but I did my usual fake nice customer service thing, but I did get a weird feeling. I ignored it, but my coworkers and I both started to get reasons to be uncomfortable. At one point, he had parked out at one of the gas pumps and just sat on top of his car, staring at the store for hours. On one of my nights off, I was with my then boyfriend at his apartment, and my coworker, Jay, called me, and I missed the call and he left a voicemail. And then he texted me, and then he messaged me on Snapchat. I called him, and he just said, "Brian called the store to speak with you." When I tell you, I was immediately annoyed. My boss at the time, his name was Brian. So I just thought it was a joke, but Jay said, no, it wasn't our boss. And I said, I don't know any other Brian, so clearly they were just confused. We hung up and my boyfriend and I laughed it off. But then Jay called me again a few minutes later. Brian had once again called the store. This time he said that he and I had a date planned, but that he didn't have my phone number, so he was just trying to get that from my coworker. Jay immediately said absolutely not and hung up. I was just beyond grateful that he had my back in that moment. This time I was more unsettled and was really trying to figure out if I knew this person personally. Then I got another call. The guy had called the store once again, but this time he got my other coworker, Newt, and he asked him for my phone number, but once again he was told that employee information was not given out. At this point, it just wasn't funny anymore because I did know people who wouldn't even think twice about handing out that information, and I don't mean that in like a malicious way, it just they wouldn't even think about it. I didn't know what I was supposed to do though, since I wasn't at the store, and at the time I was like 45 minutes away, so I just thanked them both and we hung up again. About 30 minutes later, I got another call. Brian had actually shown up to the store to pick me up for this date. Jay is a very no-nonsense person and very blunt, and so he said that not only was I not there, but that he knew for a fact there was no date planned and that I was currently at my boyfriend's house. Brian left at that point, but Jay recognized him as a regular, so I actually felt a little bit better. Jay and I then both spoke to my manager later on, and he agreed that it wasn't okay and that he was going to personally tell the guy that he was no longer welcome in, which he did a few days later, at which point this regular was beyond pissed. He ended up calling my boss name, making threats that I can't possibly remember, and then he left. He then started calling in all the time to harass the manager or to ask to speak with me. During my shifts, he then started to ride his bike on the property, so I was told to call the non-emergency line to get him trespassed. But he would be gone by the time police arrived, so they couldn't really do anything. Now this went on for weeks, to the point that police would do more frequent stops just to try to catch him. Then, one night, he came into the store. He came in the side door, so I saw him before my coworker, Lila. Thankfully, I was helping a customer, so the second that I finished the transaction, the customer was still at my counter when I ran to the back office and called police. Now, he tried to talk to Lila, who just told him to leave, and he did. Then one night, he did his biking around the property thing, I called police, he was gone before they arrived. But then Layla went outside to do the trash, and he came back and started riding laps around her. She immediately came in and yelled for me to call police, and this time they caught him and officially trespassed him. And his name was actually Ryan. So I hoped at that point that would be the end of it, and it did stop for a couple of weeks. During that time, though, I was being walked to and from my car every day. I actually switched some of my shifts to mornings, and I didn't do anything outside or alone. But then he came back to do the biking thing and was gone every time the police came, and I was getting to know the cops very, very well. Police also told me later on, not sure what your local or state laws are, so do not take this as legal advice, but in Arizona, if you have been trespassed officially and you go back on the property, you do not have to be on the property when police arrive to be arrested. It just has to be proven, video pictures, etc., that you were on the property after the trespass. Unfortunately, at the time, he was only outside and our cameras were not the best at night. And then one shift, while I was cleaning the bathrooms, he came back in, and Lila was working and she had a line, so he ended up just leaving a note on the other side of the counter and left. I didn't actually know he was in the store until after I finished cleaning, and I do actually still have a picture of the note too. His handwriting is not good, so bear with me. Hello staff, please don't take anything I said personal. I would like to apologize for my behavior in the store yesterday. I have Huntington's disease, so one of my symptoms is that sometimes I do and say things that I normally wouldn't. My name, hope I didn't hurt your feelings with the news. I don't know what got into me. Ryan. Now, I ended up calling police immediately and they took the note for evidence, but then went to arrest him since they had all this information from the trespass. I then went on with the rest of my shift. Jay came in for the overnight shift and we were chatting while he got signed in and the store phone rang. Jay and I joked that Ryan would use his one phone call to call the store, but then I looked at the number and my heart dropped. Regardless of the fact that I recognized the number, I picked it up and it was him. I hung up and called the police again. The cop who had been working with me that night called me back and he told me some information that he probably shouldn't have. Ryan was married. His wife was a nurse who worked night shifts, so she wasn't home when he was stalking me. He had also just been fired from his last job because he was stalking his coworker. At this point, I was scared, like genuinely, because it clearly wasn't stopping and he had tried to follow me home on a few occasions, so I ended up transferring stores and I never saw him again. That, however, was not the last I heard of him though. He still tried to come in and get information about me and was told to leave each time, and one of these times Jay actually overheard him on a phone call at one point lamenting that he was getting a divorce. Now, the very last thing I ever heard about him was that he told my male coworkers that one day we would all laugh about this situation. They didn't laugh, and I find it very hard to laugh even now. So, yeah, that's all I have. That was difficult to, get through because it's hard to listen to other people, tell these stories of how they're being stalked when you don't know what it actually feels like, because it's very scary to think that somebody won't leave you alone regardless of how many times you tell them to or when police get involved, but it is very difficult to actually live through it, and that was many years ago now. I'm getting old, but that was a while ago and I was only 19 and terrified of my own shadow, let alone somebody else. But yeah, I'm sure I have all this information on him. I almost got a restraining order, so that was super exciting. But yeah, that was a terrible time in my life on all fronts. But it is very, very scary. But enough about that. A couple of things. First of all, look at little Annie's Love Mothman. See, this is just his Halloween costume, so he's gonna be in it all the time. And then I also got this. I'm really hoping I'm not gonna push them over. Look at how sick that is. I had to do Andy's face paint because the Funko Pops don't have masks or anything. But that's so sick. I was so excited to get that. But yeah, so there's gonna be a couple more a little bit spookier Halloween videos coming up. I'm gonna record a few more videos. They're just gonna be a little bit shorter than usual. I also have 2 book reviews to do for some more spooky, ominous novellas. That's what I was looking for. Novellas. So they're just a little cute and short and sweet. But I also have a couple of drinking games that I want to do based on like Halloween movies. So like think like Nightmare Before Christmas, Coraline, maybe some Curse the Cowardly Dog, stuff like that. Super fun. But I am dyeing my hair soon, and so it's gonna be intermixed with my hair like it is now, and then my hair will be dyed. So this is just gonna be a fun month, and I wish I had gotten like I pre-planned for this, but I didn't, and so this is what it is. But yeah, I'm gonna stop rambling now. I appreciate you guys for joining me. If you wanted to hit that like, subscribe button, all that fun stuff. Comment if you have ever had a stalker, and what the story behind that was, or email me. Like, either way, I like people's stories, and I think that's really interesting. And I feel a lot better, not like a ton better, but like I live in another state. He's not gonna find me, but like I do feel a little bit better like having gotten that out there and like finally off of my conscience. But yeah, so I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Bye.